How an avoidant tests you after no contact. Imagine finally hearing from an avoidant after weeks or months of complete silence, only to realize that every interaction feels strangely confusing. You expected a heartfelt apology or a clear explanation, but instead you receive mixed signals that leave you questioning everything again. What if those confusing behaviors are not completely random, but subtle ways of measuring whether you are still emotionally available to them? Today, we are uncovering the hidden tests avoidants often use after no contact, and what those behaviors may actually reveal about their mindset. By the end of this video, you will know how to recognize these patterns without getting pulled back into the same emotional cycle. If this topic resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and let's begin. No contact changes the emotional balance in ways that many avoidants never expect when the relationship first ends. While they may initially appear relieved by the distance, the silence often creates curiosity that slowly grows stronger over time. Without your constant messages, reassurance, or emotional availability, they lose an important source of familiarity that once felt guaranteed. This does not automatically mean they suddenly become ready for commitment or emotional vulnerability in a healthy way. Instead, many avoidants become internally conflicted between wanting connection and fearing the emotional closeness that comes with it. That inner conflict is often where the testing begins because they want information before risking emotional exposure themselves. The first test usually comes through a casual message that feels surprisingly small considering the history you shared together. They might simply ask how you have been, or react to one of your social media stories without deeper conversation. On the surface, it appears friendly and harmless, but they are quietly watching your emotional reaction more than your actual words. They want to know whether you are still waiting for them, or whether your life genuinely moved forward without them. If you immediately respond with overwhelming excitement, lengthy explanations, or emotional relief, they learn something important. They may conclude that they still have emotional access whenever they choose, reducing any urgency to change unhealthy patterns. If you respond calmly, respectfully, and without chasing, the emotional dynamic suddenly becomes much less predictable for them. That uncertainty can create both curiosity and anxiety because they are no longer certain of their place in your emotional world. The second test involves disappearing again shortly after reconnecting, sometimes without offering any explanation whatsoever. This behavior often frustrates anxious partners because it feels like history is repeating itself all over again. However, the avoidant may be observing whether you immediately pursue them or respect the renewed silence with confidence. Their fear of engulfment sometimes increases after reconnecting because emotional closeness begins feeling real once again. Creating distance becomes a way of regulating their own discomfort while also measuring your emotional independence. If you repeatedly chase after every withdrawal, they receive confirmation that nothing has fundamentally changed between you. But when you remain emotionally grounded, they are forced to confront their own uncertainty instead of managing yours. Another common test happens through indirect communication rather than direct emotional conversations about the relationship. They may like an old photo, watch every story you post, or casually appear in places they know you visit. These actions allow them to maintain a sense of connection without exposing themselves to vulnerable rejection. They are collecting emotional information while keeping enough distance to protect themselves if things feel overwhelming. Many people mistake this behavior as clear evidence that reconciliation is guaranteed, but that assumption can become dangerous. Interest does not always equal readiness, especially when deeper emotional issues remain completely unaddressed beneath the surface. One of the most confusing tests involves bringing up shared memories without discussing the relationship itself. They might mention a favorite restaurant, a vacation, or an inside joke that only the two of you understand. Those memories create emotional warmth while avoiding conversations about accountability, commitment, or unresolved pain. It allows them to reconnect emotionally without immediately facing the difficult conversations that true healing requires. If you instantly begin discussing getting back together, they may suddenly retreat because the emotional intensity increases too quickly. This withdrawal often surprises people who believed the shared memories were obvious invitations to reconcile immediately. In reality, the avoidant may have simply been testing how safe emotional contact feels after the period of separation. Another subtle test happens when they ask questions about your current life, without revealing much about their own. They become curious about your growth, friendships, career, or whether someone new has entered your life. These questions help them understand whether they still occupy an important emotional place within your thoughts. At the same time, they carefully limit their own emotional disclosure to avoid feeling overly exposed. Healthy communication requires mutual openness, but testing usually creates an imbalance where only one person becomes vulnerable. Recognizing that imbalance protects you from investing emotionally before genuine consistency has been demonstrated. Some avoidants also test your emotional boundaries by making light jokes about the breakup or previous conflicts. They are paying close attention to whether those topics trigger anger, desperation, guilt, or emotional pleading from you. Remaining calm does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending the past never happened. It means responding from self-respect rather than reacting from fear of losing them once again. Confidence often feels unfamiliar to someone who expected you to remain emotionally dependent after no contact. That unexpected stability can challenge assumptions they quietly held about your availability throughout the separation. Another important test involves inconsistent effort where moments of closeness are followed by emotional distance again. One day they seem affectionate, curious, and interested, then suddenly become difficult to reach for several days. This inconsistency is emotionally exhausting because it creates hope followed by uncertainty over and over again. Instead of focusing only on isolated moments of affection, observe the overall pattern across several weeks. Consistency always reveals more about someone's emotional readiness than occasional bursts of connection ever can. Many avoidants are not intentionally trying to manipulate every situation, even though their behavior feels deeply confusing. Often they are struggling with their own fears of dependence, rejection, vulnerability, and emotional responsibility. Understanding those fears can increase compassion, but compassion should never replace healthy personal boundaries. Empathy becomes powerful only when it exists alongside self-respect rather than emotional self-sacrifice. Your goal after no contact should never be passing someone else's emotional tests at the expense of yourself. The healthier goal is discovering whether both people have developed enough emotional maturity for a balanced relationship. Ask yourself whether their actions consistently match their words instead of becoming distracted by occasional hopeful moments. Real emotional growth appears through accountability, reliability, honest communication, and steady effort over a long period. If those qualities remain absent, no amount of patience alone will create the relationship you deserve. Sometimes the greatest lesson from no contact is realizing how much stronger and calmer you have actually become. That personal growth allows you to evaluate reconnecting from confidence instead of emotional scarcity. Ironically, this healthier mindset often changes the dynamic more than any strategy designed to make an avoidant return. Whether they come back or continue moving away, your emotional stability remains something nobody else can control. That is ultimately the strongest response to every hidden test, because it protects your peace above all else. If someone truly wants to rebuild a relationship, they will eventually move beyond testing and toward genuine consistency. Healthy love is never sustained through endless uncertainty, but through trust that grows from repeated dependable actions. So if an avoidant reaches out after no contact, pay attention not only to their interest, but also to their consistency. Because the future of any relationship is determined less by emotional curiosity and far more by emotional responsibility.